Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to start in a few seconds, so if you can bear with us, okay? So, good morning. Today, we are going to have our Green Digital Action Track pillar on From Commitment to Action, Implemented Standards for a Sustainable Future. It's a very important day for this pillar 4A because after several conversations during that they have since July, today they are going to announce what the work was done, what they have discussed. And I have the pleasure that today we have two main speakers with us to open our session. Allow me to welcome Mr. Seiso Onoe, Director of the Telecommunication Standardization Bureau, who will give us some opening remarks. You can talk here or you?
Hello? Can you hear me? Okay. Chan Sin, Vice President of Standards and Industry Development at Huawei. Colleagues and friends, good morning. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to all to this session. Our Green Digital Action Track at this conference is supported by more than 40 companies and organizations. The track design reflects the importance of impactful partnership across industry sectors. We are looking at 6 pivotal areas of action. Just one number, innovation for the ICT industry to achieve net zero emission. Progress, number 2, progress toward the circular ICT industry. 3, how digital technologies and related skills development can contribute to climate action in all industries. 4, the value of open environmental data in advancing climate solutions. 5, how digital technologies support life-saving early warning to minimize the impact of disasters. And finally, how we can boost the adoption of standards to environmental sustainability. Huawei has led the organization of our sessions contributing this pillar on standards implementation. I thank you very much, both for your support to our discussions at this conference and your commitment to our standardization work. I also want to thank ISO for hosting this discussion together with IEC, ISO, and ITU to drive the development of comprehensive international standards for our interconnected world. Our cooperation will be the focus of our next session in this pavilion at 11:15. And I look forward to seeing many of you there. Our Green Digital Action Track focus on the global action required to digital technologies to make meaningful contributions to environmental sustainability. International standards are fundamental to this pursuit. Standards, standards offers blueprint for everyone to take advantage of latest innovations supporting environmental sustainability. Standards and the inclusive standardization process are dynamic instruments to help us achieve sustainable future. Standardization work is driven by collaboration and consensus decisions. It's a key avenue to build voluntary commitment to new ways of working together. It's a proven way to agree on best practices and bring them to global scale. Standards are not just essential, they are sexy. No response. Okay, this session will highlight Why? It will offer expert insight on the great values that standards can offer you as companies, policymakers, and regulators. It will also present an action plan for standards implementation, recognizing that the value of standards is determined largely by how widely they are used. Standards can provide powerful tools to create a future we want. Let's ensure that we apply these tools to maximum effect. Thank you.
Many thanks, Onoe-san, for your kind words. Now, allow me to introduce Ms. Chang Xin, Vice President of Standards and Industry Development from Huawei Technologies.
Good morning. I'm Chang Xin from Huawei. It's my great pleasure to be here at COP28 and to be one of the partners of Green Digital Action. And many thanks for ISO to host this session. As we all know, the world now is changing very fast, and we are facing many problems of sustainability development. I think only through our collective expertise, diverse perspective, and shared commitments, we can work together to protect our planet. And I would say it's a really great start point that we have this session on green standards, because I think it is we can say this session, through this session, we can say the importance of cooperation between different standards organizations has been widely recognized. And I think based on the green standards and also the gap analysis, the best practice when we implementing the green standards, we can have I think this outcome will be the first step for our work. And furthermore, I think all the efforts post COP28 will be more exciting and necessary. We are really looking forward we can have a future working group work on the future. And I hope all the partners of our JDA could be also involved in this work, and then we can make a tangible impact into the real world. So in conclusion, I would also really like to express our willingness to be one of the partner here, and I really hope this session would be the start point of our valuable work towards the better, more sustainable future. Thank you.
Many thanks, Sanjin. Now, we would like to have a quick chat with some panelists on exploring the vital role of environmental sustainability standard in attaining net zero and international commitments. These dynamic, fast-paced dialogues aim to highlight the importance of standards for all stakeholders to identify, promote, and implement actions toward achieving a sustainable digital transformation. Allow me to welcome to the stage. It's a small stage, but a cozy stage. This is important. So Justin Wilkes, Executive Director from the Environmental Coalition on Standards from ECOS. Please, Justin. Sarah Ahmad, engineer from the Spectrum Quality from the TDRA from UAE. And Phil Brown, Director of the Metabolic Institute. And I'm going to be the moderator, so. How are you this morning? All good? Have you found in COP? Very good?
It's intense, it's busy, it's huge. It's intense, it's busy, it's huge, but learning a lot from my side. So all very good so far. Justin, anything to add?
This COP reminds me of COP15, and I fear it will be as less successful than COP15, so that troubles me greatly.
For me, it's an exciting experience.
Very nice. Despite of the queues, I hope everybody this morning were facing the problem of the queues, but we are managing it. So we would like to do a very nice conversation with the three of you because one, you represent the government, you also feel you represent the industry, and ECOS, well, you also are an advocate for environmental sustainability standards. I would like to ask you, Sarah, can you share some examples on how you navigated the integration of environmental sustainability and standards into practices? What challenge have you encountered, and any standardization gap that you have identified from the government perspective?
First of all, thank you, Reina, for being the moderator for this session. Good morning, everyone. Allow me first to introduce myself. I'm Sarah Ahmed, the Engineer Spectrum Quality from TDRA, and currently I'm working in regulatory, in licensing and interconnection section. TDRA is a telecommunication and digital regulatory authority. So we are the regulator in the UAE, and we are the main pillar of both telecommunication and digital sector through the UAE. So we are working also in collaboration with licensees, companies, to ensure that the digital transformation, the technology and the sustainability through UAE, through policies, regulation, projects and so on. So moving to your question, we have working again, as I said before, with the licensees on different projects, starting from encouraging the e-West, the eSIM card, the solar clean energy, and so on. So thank you.
Thank you. Phil, anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I actually represent two organizations, as Rainer indicated, presenting a bit of an industry lens. So yes, my title is with the Institute Director, but I also represent a group called Circularize. Circularize has been doing a lot of work within digital product passports. Within this process, we've actually been part of many collaborations and coalitions to try and bring standards to industry, to actually try and look into the data that's required for this and create alignment. From a much wider lens, though, we look at initiatives such as the Global Battery Alliance, Catena X, or Surplus, or MOBI, or also the One Planet Initiative, where there are actually cohorts of actors in there really trying to work on, okay, how do we actually make sure that the standard can be adopted? As was indicated earlier, a standard is only useful when it is widely adopted. So how do you actually bring those actors together to be at the table to discuss that in the writing form and then into the implementation as well? With that, I would say these collaborations, they take time. They can be a bit complex, but actually if you do it correctly and bring those industry members along with you, that adoption will be much, much quicker.
Thank you, Phil. Now, Justin, I would like to ask you a question. How can industry and NGOs, from the point of view of also ECOS, collaborate to set and implement realistic and impactful environmental sustainability standards that drive positive change?
Thank you very much, and good morning. I think from ECOS's perspective, the infrastructure is there. I think the place for that cooperation is the standardization organizations, whether that's ISO, whether that's IEC, whether that's the ITU, or the voluntary sustainability standards system. We have 30 liaisons with ISO, we have 15 liaisons with the IEC. We joined the ITU in the summer, and we also engage with bio-based voluntary sustainability standards and also the Global Electronic Council's EPEAT system, which unleashes green public procurement. So I think the infrastructure is there for that cooperation. I miss the consistent leadership from an environmental perspective from within the standardization organizations. The London Declaration, I think, was an extremely positive and strong first step. I think what we need now is the leadership from ISO, from the IEC, from national standardization bodies to drive forward the London Declaration. It's not going to drive itself. It needs bold leadership from the organizations. The system, the standardization system provides for that collaboration between government, between societal stakeholders, between industry. And I think if we work well together, we can unleash green innovation and we can enable and facilitate, and here standards will be absolutely crucial. A move to the circular economy from the linear model will unleash enormous economic benefits. And I think the standards will be key for that to be achieved.
Thank you. Thank you, Justin. And it's good that we are at the ISO Pavilion. We have ISO, IC, ITU here. The next session will be also on the World Standards Collaboration. So we can see that there is a commitment from the Standards Development Organization to make this happen. We have also regulators here at COP. So we are, and with the Green Digital Action Track, we are also having the industry, and we want this movement to go ahead and that this can be implemented. Phil, anything to add to how the industry and SGO can collaborate and implement realistic and impactful change?
Well, you mentioned all the different standards groups here, but we actually at Circarize, we were working with the ISCC, so the International Sustainability and Carbon Certificate. So they're a group based in Cologne who write, a standard and certification process. We did a proof of concept with them where we took their 350-page document into what we called a smart questioning list. So trying to take all of the logic and the calculations and the methodology and put that behind a question list in a digital system. The idea being there to make sure that, because this is a chain of custody model, it's based on biofuels and bioplastics. There's two different certification processes. The challenge that we were seeing in the industry was, for instance, Philips Domestic Appliances, who were buying that material, they could not actually certify it because actors in between the value chain were not certified. And their barrier to doing so was that there were not enough auditors or consultants to help them make that jump into certification. So we did a proof of concept with 5 actors from the value chain prior to Philips, as well as OEMs and others within the group. You can find more information on the Circarize website. The idea there was to simplify the process and create that chain of custody on an immutable ledger, in this case a blockchain. The brilliant element within that was that the smart questioning list made it really straightforward. You filled in the data points that you had, and obviously if you don't have the data points, then you need to go and get those and assess it. But you can actually have a third party accredit that on a blockchain system as well. So this is where we wanted to work with regulators as well as the certification bodies, as well as the auditors, all on the same system. So it's about making standard structure and data manageable for those mid-tier actors as well.
Thank you so much, Phil. And with what you're saying, it's also ring in my head that what the group wants to launch today, this peer learning working group, will also help this, because sometimes standards can be a bit complex. And it's sometimes even for the industry or for some small, medium enterprises or for some countries. So with this peer learning working group, they can share their ideas, they can learn how they implement it, what are the good sides or what can be changed, because as you know, standards can also be revised because they are done by by experts, but once you implement, you see what can be changed or not. So Sarah, any example that you have on that, what we have discussed in today?
Thank you. Moving on toward the collaboration, as we know now, the licenses now they are working on the digital billing. So all bills now they are digital. So in order to save the paper. However, we need to consider the power, the energy consumption. With that, we would like to introduce the MORO. This is from the DIWA, Dubai Electricity Water Authority, where they have a data center, which is the first in the world that works by a clear energy. So by these examples, we want also to emphasize like either if we are saving the environment by reducing the consumption of the papers. On the other hand, we consider the energy consumption on the other side, because if we are using our device, we are using more power consumption. So the data center will consume more energy, and we are now powering this data center by a clear solar system.
Thank you so much. Now, looking ahead, what do you envision as a key milestone needed over the next decade to ensure that environmental sustainability standards can play an active role? We have more or less mentioned it, but if you can give me in a few words, what will be the next key milestone? Justin?
Thank you. You mentioned the next decade. We don't have a decade. We did have a decade over the last 10 years, and we squandered that one. Before that, we had a few decades, 40 plus years. I remember listening to Carl Sagan recently, really quite a good communicator, speaking about climate change back in, the 1980s. So we've missed a few decades. We've missed 4 decades. We do not have another decade to squander. We are on course for 2.4 degree warming. Let me perhaps go to the heart of a standardizer. In a warming world of 2.4, are you really going to be in a position to develop and sell more standards? It's in no one's interest to fail on mitigation. It's on no one's interest to fail on adaptation. It's in no one's interest not to have the right stakeholders around the table, whether those are the right industry stakeholders, the repairers, the designers, as well as the recyclers when looking at circularity. It's absolutely crucial to have the right industry stakeholders around the table. It's important to have civil society around the table when standards have an impact on civil society. Otherwise, the standards that are going to be developed will not be fit for purpose.
For myself, I agree with a lot that Justin indicated there. But I would also say going forward, there needs to be a lot more automated data collection and validation, augmenting what a lot of auditors are already doing within the standards and certification space. So, I mean, my lens is very much the use of digital technologies, but it does need to be counterbalances with the impact of those digital technologies. And I do agree with Justin's point that if we do this just for standard's sake, rather than actually being able to compare products across different regions produced in different ways. I mean, that is the aim of a standard, that you can actually compare products and actually have that view where somebody will say, okay, this has reached a certain standard, therefore I can attest to and understand that this claim is being correct. So we need to be able to validate those much more quickly. And that requires, I think, a lot more use of AI to actually do a lot more of that data validation process and augment and improve the process to date. Because when you actually go into organizations, a lot of it is spreadsheets and pieces of paper, which is technology from, well, too long ago for us to deal with the crisis in 7 years, 5 years' time.
From our side, we are aiming also to draft a policy to ensure that the licensees obtain sustainability in the telecom sector. However, now we have conducted a white paper. It's titled Environmental Sustainability and Carbon Emission Reduction in Telecommunication Sector and Digital Government. It emphasizes to achieve the goal of 2050 to achieve the net zero. In addition, this white paper also it's focusing on the 3-scope approach for the emission, the direct emission, the indirect emission, the other indirect emissions as well.
Thank you so much. So we have heard a lot of ideas right now. There is the need, of course, of collaboration. There is the need of data. There is a need of raising awareness. And because I want to be very conscious with the time to allow the other roundtable, we haven't if you, well, we were discussing with Justin this morning how to make also standards more inclusive, how to have the right people in the table discussing, also how to engage other regions. In 1 minute, can you, 2 minutes, can you give us a closing statement, or how can we do this inclusiveness, this also to further strengthen this collaboration in order that more regions can participate in the standard development, and we leave it here, as you say, we don't have decades, but we live on the 12th or tomorrow that everyone, I don't know when you're going back home, but with what actions should we drive after this COP? Justin? That was a hard question.
Hard questions can be given easy answers to. Leadership. We absolutely need leadership. 7 years gives us what? The standards that are being developed at the moment, plus a revision, and that is what we need to deliver 1.5 degrees. So if those standards are not being developed now, then we have a problem. Standardizers, I think, need to appreciate the urgency of that, and that will require leadership from national standardization bodies. It will require leadership from the international standardization organizations. Leadership, ambition, and cooperation with stakeholders, an openness to criticism from outside, an openness to bring in new stakeholders, whether those from new geographies that are underrepresented, whether that's organizations that are underrepresented, and industries that are underrepresented. Innovators and perhaps fewer incumbents might also help in that process.
To keep it simple and in a few sentences, test and prototype your standard earlier with industry players so that it is actually implementable. It can be very in draft form, but if you put out a standard that is too complex and then industry cannot collect the data, they'll just throw their hands up and go, we're not going to use it. So bring them along in the journey, prototype early, test, think big, start small, keep going.
Research and development, and keep collaboration between the companies, the universities, and keep updated.
So thank you very much. I love the speakers. They were concise. They were right to the point, and good that we have the leadership also here. So thank you so much. And I now will give the floor to my colleague Ahmed for the next roundtable. If we can just take a picture of this session, please stand up. Thank you so much, Ahmed. My dear friend Ahmed, that he did a good job on the Green Digital Action pillar, drafting this group. So I give you the floor.
Thank you very much, Rihanna, and thanks everyone for being here. So just to give a quick intro about what we're going to do is basically what we did in the last year as a part of the Green Digital Action Alliance. There's, as you know, many pillars. One of these pillars is Green Standards, Pillar 4. And we've been working with all the partners, mostly all the partners, throughout this year to create some sort of a collective work in terms of standardization map of what's happening in different organizations. So we looked at the adopted already existing standards that has been already done in other organizations, or ITU, ISO, IEC, IEEE, many other organizations. And we kind of mapped all these kind of standards that are relevant to the green digital action. The second thing we did is we tried to identify some gaps. And there was very interesting contributions from different, I would say, not only organizations, but also companies, private sector, from the ICT domain, from non-ICT domain as well, which is very interesting. And you can identify these kind of gaps. And we created all this in one document, simple one that you can just look at and see a quick map of what's happening in this area and what's kind of missing that we need to work on. So this session, basically, we're going to have some of these people, some of these entities who have been contributing to this kind of work. We're going to have a quick round of some discussion about what's happening there. And then hopefully at the end of this session, the last 5 minutes, we're going to say the 2 outcomes that we have that we have done for the Green Digital Action. So it's a very interesting session. I would like to ask actually people who are in this session to come here on this very small cozy stage. So we have actually a lot of players. We have ISO, we have Adam from ISO, we have Gabriela from ISC, we have Ihab Khairat from Liquid Technologies, Paulo Jamma from ITU, we have also Mr. Saifur Rahman from IEEE. And we have also Tim from HSBC. So as you can see, the whole round table is very interesting. We have 4 standardization organizations, 1 ICT private sector, and 1 non-ICT private sector, which is a very interesting kind of mix. So let me start maybe with our host for the session today, with ISO. So Adam, quickly. I would like to ask you, I know there is a lot of standardization work that has been happening in many organizations, particularly in ISO. We got many of the standards in our call to action document from ISO. What do you think is the main areas of standardization in terms of the green standards, sustainability standards that ISO is working on? And what do you think is the gaps that need to be addressed by organizations like ISO?
Well, thank you, Ahmed. And it's wonderful to have you all here today. Probably 3 things from me to start us off. The first thing is that within the standards community, there's a lot of standards that go to the heart of environmental sustainability across the entire catalogue. And I think sometimes that is forgotten, that when we're talking about standards for almost everything, that there are elements within those standards that relate back to sustainability. My first point. My second point. Yeah, my second point is there are some really core standards like the environmental management system standards, the net zero guidelines that ISO published last year, that provide this really interesting connection between the standards that exist and environmental sustainability. But I think what's happening at this COP is that as we start to talk about second scope and third scope, that there's this connective layer that the organisations on this panel need to work together to make sure that 2 things happen. Firstly, that we don't start again and say we don't have any standards, because we've got a lot of standards. And I think sometimes I tell people, we don't need too many more standards to make the system work. We just need to make it connect together. But then secondly, making it connect in a way that, to some of the conversation on the last panel, the users are able to use easily. They're able to understand that we're talking to the users of our standards using words, not numbers that, we understand here in the standards world, but a lot of people don't really get. And that we're able to connect them to all this really, really valuable work that's been going on for 100 years.
Wow, the last part, I think there's a lot of things we need to talk about here. So it's what you're saying basically in the last point, is that there's much more work to be done to simplify and to make sure that we can communicate these standards to the world, right? Very much. Okay. So I'll go for another standardization as well, organization here. So maybe let's go for IEEE, if possible. So maybe kind of the same question, because I would like to see the kind of, the complementary view of this, which is what is the standards in terms of the green sustainability aspect that IEEE is mostly working on, and where you can see the challenges or the gaps that needs to be worked on more.
Thank you very much. First of all, ISO, IEC, ITU, I for international. IEEE, our I know international, the institute, they're different. But we are international. We are present in 175 countries. We have members in Dubai here, 3,000 people are members. We have standards going on for more than 100 years now. The best one, you know, everybody has this machine in your hand. Wi-Fi is our standard, IEEE standard Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi standard 802.3AZ is energy efficiency, your question. So we're standard on how to make your network more efficient, starting from Huawei's base station to Ericsson's network. All of them in our standards bodies. What we bring to the table is we are a neutral platform. We can invite all the vendors and equipment makers to our place, our meetings. And even though we don't do international in our name, our standard committees are very international, very international. So my point to your question here, Ahmad, is how do we go forward? First of all, standards not good enough unless you have people using it. That's important. We heard that in the last session that you talked about. How we make it happen. We have a activity called Government Engagement Program on Standards, GEPS, GEPS. How we engage governments in standards. I come from Bangladesh originally. Came to me my question from the ICT minister. What question should I ask? ZT was at the table, Huawei at the table, that how the base station you are proposing in Bangladesh will be following some standards. We have 71 countries as members of that GAPS group. We have webinars with them on a regular basis and tell them what questions to ask. That's how we make them possible. That's our relevance, is that tell them you will never get a good answer unless you have a good question. That's our job. Educating, encouraging, and entertaining both parties. So that's where we're coming from. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting points. And by the way, I was one of the IEEE members personally when I was very back. I mean, long time ago when I was in university. So I know it's international. Everyone knows that. So, but that's a very good point, and I would say it's a segue to the next maybe question. It's how to. I mean, standards are only useful when they are implemented, when they are kind of used. So maybe I'll go to the private sector, maybe to liquid technologies as one of the very important liquid intelligence technologies. So one of the very important things to ask here is from a private sector perspective, how do you see standardization organization, the standards coming out, and what are the challenges in implementing such standards? And of course, you were also very active in the work that we have been doing in the call to action. So for you, Ihab, to tell us a little bit about that.
Thank you, Ahmed. Yeah. So as you know, our head of innovation, group innovation and technology, is working heavily with ITU and the ITF on the standard stream. But I'm going to speak from a procurement perspective. So I had group procurement. Yeah, I had group procurement for our group, and the challenge I see is, while we buy equipment, now we look as part of the evaluation process. While we look at cost, and we look at technical specs, but we don't have a set of sustainability criteria, if you like, that we can use during the evaluation process to compare what various OEMs or suppliers would be providing us. So we do this in automobiles, for example. So now most OEMs of automobiles, they can tell you what's the carbon footprint per kilometer traveled by a vehicle, for example. But we don't have something like how much energy is consumed per megabit per second per port, for example. We don't have that. But if we do have that, then we can definitely put it as one of the criteria out while issuing these RFPs or RFQs, and then we can evaluate accordingly. And we could put certain weights, and these weights should be increasing as we go along, on these criteria during the evaluation process. So I think that's the gap. That's what we should be working on going forward.
Well, that's interesting angle, the procurement part, and the kind of energy per port kind of thing. It's definitely missing. Maybe I would go to IC in this aspect to see from IC perspective. I know there's a lot of work in standards. What would be again the main areas that you think IC is developing standards in this kind of domain, and also how do you see the challenges and maybe related to kind of things, procurement or network efficiency, carbon efficiency per port, or things like that? How do you see this?
Well, I would like to reiterate what Adam said from ISO. I think there's a lot of work that's available, and I think one of the gaps is that there are not everybody who should know knows. I think sometimes it's a very well kept secret. I think also that in the policy and regulatory space, there is a lot of people who are not aware. Sometimes they think that there are miracles out there that make things work, but actually there are concrete actions behind it. In the case of the IC, our work is extremely technical, so I would say checklists is not sufficient, but there are huge attempts that we do in order to get people to understand where our work fits into systems. Definite gaps, and where we are very much focusing on is circular economy, what do you call that? Not recycling, because recycling means that you got rid of it at one point. It's more like upcycling, reuse, making sure that old components work the same, are reliable, safe, deliver what they promise. And I think one of the most important aspects of what we do, and that's my personal view, coming from industry originally, is that we help verify and certify that manufacturer promises and standards are actually being used, and that the outcomes are what are being said. And that is extremely important. And to come to your point, there is work going on in the Joint Technical Committee of ISO and IEC on efficiency criteria for data centers, for example, for software, for the megabytes and bits that are being, what that consumes. And I think in the previous panel it was said not to underestimate that one impact has an impact on something else, and you need to really think holistically about things. I'm thinking back of my youth, where Germany wanted to have everything in glass, and then they realized that glass transport and cleaning is very energy consuming, and they suddenly had to think about it in a more holistic way.
Thank you very much, Gabriela. This was a very holistic, I would say, overview of what's the gaps. And yeah, thank you for iterating the same point as ISO. I mean, it's the implementation of things. I'll go now to private sector, but non-ICT, so HSBC, and you were very active in the calls and the things we did and the preparatory phase for this kind of call to action, and particularly in the gaps area. So maybe my question to you would be two things. One, I know you're reading the IT strategy and sustainability there, so to let us know from your sector what's the work has been done in this area, sustainability area, and also the gap that you added in our call to action, why you think it's important, and tell us a little bit about it. Please, Tim.
Thanks, Ahmed. So for those that don't know me, I'm Tim Smoltich. I work in technology strategy for HSBC. And the first question that you might be asking is, why is HSBC involved in this conversation at all? We're a bank, we're not a technology firm. However, by size, we are probably would fit in the top 20 software houses globally quite easily. So we have a vast number of technologists, and those technologists are very, very interested in making sure that they can operate sustainably, efficiently, and effectively. So one of the key things that we noticed was technologists, want to be part of the conversation, but it is very, very difficult for a technologist today to understand their impact in the environment. So standards are great if they are well known and if they're put out there, but if no one can understand them and if no one can use them, then they are pointless. And what we've seen in the industry today is we have a lot of fantastic standards. The hardware providers have got specific standards for how they can understand the impact of a network switch or a hardware device, but stitching that together across the ecosystem today is still very, very difficult. So if I look at what we're asking of the industry and all the commitments that are being made in previous COPs and in this COP, we need to triple renewable energy consumption and manufacturing, but we also need to double the efficiency. And for technologists, that means we need to pretty much halve our electricity consumption. And is that even doable by the time frame that we have? I would argue with the standards where they are today and with the level of knowledge that people have in the society of technologists, it is very difficult. So we need to make sure that all technologists make sustainability as BAU, period. Otherwise, we're going to be very far away from being able to achieve that objective. If I take an example of why this is so difficult today, we called out the need for AI, and AI being able to help us along that journey. If I was a startup trying to help out with that solution, the first thing I would need to do is to go to the market to get sponsorship and funding. The first thing an investor will ask is, how much carbon will you reduce by doing that? Which they will probably be able to answer. The second one they will ask is, how much will you consume by being able to do this service? And AI, which may not be very well known, but AI is a very large consumer of electricity, a very large emitter. How would that company then look through that life cycle about, well, how can I do this in the most efficient way? Is this the best way to achieve that outcome? So they would first look at the equipment that they're using. Let's say they were going to buy a laptop to start to write this document. They would have to go to Apple, HP, Lenovo, Dell, look at their product carbon footprint information, all of which are developed in different mechanisms. Some use PIA, some use something else. Then they would need to compare that data. There is no way to easily compare it. It is very difficult to find. Then second to that, they would want to look at the operations of running their models. How do they compare the cloud providers or a data center that they're operating within? When a data center provider may themselves be outsourcing to another third party. We've seen many instances where we've seen different carbon data coming from companies that are operating within the same region, the same data center, and it is very confusing to be able to understand that. So standards need to be able to bridge that gap, and we need to be able to create a central source where any technologist can go in and easily understand the data and understand their impact to the environment. If we can do that, then we've got a great opportunity. If we can't, then I think we will struggle as an industry to be able to hit that target.
No, thank you very much, Tim. I mean, it's a very good linking the industry and the implementation part with the standards and what's need to be happening there. So, I mean, from this, I would go to ITU. I mean, you have Paolo Gemma representing ITU and particularly ITU-T Study Group 5. So, Paolo, from this perspective, from the perspective of having standards that can be implemented, and also this idea of software efficiency that should be taken in consideration not only on a product level or on hardware level. What's ITU Study Group 5 are doing, and what are the things you would like to share with us on that? Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. These nice questions. Okay, as a Study Group 5, we work a lot. We make a lot of work on standard, on efficiency, on LCA for ICT. We make good standard. We are moving a little to have, just to answer to the guy from ISO, to have standards that are a little more easy to apply, because we see that we have perfect standard in line with the ISO standard for methodology for LCA, but it's very complicated to use. And so we are working on two different things. One is to give a standard simple to use for designer, for architecture of network, because after that my friend develop a network, he make an assessment, find that the network is not sustainable, he cannot destroy the network. We need something to check before at design level. And this is one part. The second part, we are working on sustainable software. We are starting some work to see the efficiency of software, the computing power efficiency that is very new. I suppose will be very complicated to see. But we are starting. We see what will be the result, and we are also collecting and sharing best practice, because one of our goals is also to share between all the stakeholders that are in Energy5, between all the industry, all the university, some idea before to come a standard, because there is, as I said a lot of times, there is not only one solution that fits to all of this. We need to look on different solutions for different reality, because what I can use in Norway, I cannot use in Sicily for data center, for example. Is a very different. We have a lot of solutions. We are standardized in some way a lot of solutions, and we need to give guidance on how to select the right solution for all.
Thank you, Paul. And I think I have to get this opportunity that we are all here and present at COP28 on the ICE Pavilion in this discussion, ask you something here for all of you. So maybe we can go like 1 minute each, or if somebody wants to jump in. The question would be, now we have this work that we did with the Green Digital Action, and we're probably going to have the working group that we will announce in 10 minutes that's going to continue the work after COP28. What should we be focusing on for the coming period post COP28, as standardization organizations, as private sector, as maybe big software houses or banks, whatever you want to call this idea of having non-ICT centric sectors jumping into this domain? What we need to do to move forward in terms of maybe collaboration, maybe some standards we should focus on, implementation. So who would like to start? Yeah, ISO, and then we go with Gabriel.
Yeah, look, so I just want to go back to Tim's point, right? Because I think it's a really important point of making it easy for people to work with our standards and to use our standards and to make them effective and efficient in the real world. And we're talking about technology and we're talking about carbon, and I get that, but we could equally be talking about corn or rubber or shoes or chairs. And I think the trick for us as a community here is not to overcomplicate things and to open up the data and the systems and the standards that we already have to allow Tim as a bank, right? So you think about a bank in all of its forms. These guys are going to want to have a huge amount of data that already exists in our standards, right? And we need to spend time not reinventing a whole bunch of standards and wasting precious time and energy. We need to open it up at a data layer so that that data can be used and extracted and interpreted in different ways. So whether you're designing the bank's IT systems or lending money to a cornfield somewhere, or making sure as we sort of start to get into this next layer of board reporting, that all of the SDGs are dealt with. I think that is the critical thing for the standards community to be doing together, not saying, oh look, this standard's better than that one, let's go and do it again. Working together to get that data layer out. Sorry, that was more than a minute, but I just wanted to make that point.
No, it was a very important point. So opening up the data for collaboration between the standards organization. Gabriela, please.
Cooperate, 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 communicate, communicate, communicate. And I think that's the key. I think that on the one side, we know what we know, and a lot of people don't know what we know. And there is a huge effort that has to go on the one side to get more people to the table, because when you don't know, you only know what you know. You don't know what the others know, and you need to get their input. And we need to get much more people aware of what we're doing. In the case of the IC, ease of application, I think, is gonna be difficult always because it's highly technical. But at least the people know what we're working on, how we're contributing. And maybe to reassure you, we are just now launching, we have been launching a system that verifies product carbon declarations based on an ISO standard, where we hopefully get to comparing apples with apples, so that declarations that are out there, people can be assured that they have all been coming up with through the same system to have an end result that is comparable. I don't think that we need to necessarily produce many more standards. There are gaps, and I think, as I said before, circular is definitely a problem.
Thank you. Any comments or advice for us moving forward from this side? IEEE maybe?
Let me start. I'll take a very different perspective. We heard here what industry is doing and going forward. But in here, what is the target? Energy efficiency. What do you want us to do? We didn't hear that. That can be done by governments, not us. We had Dubai was here earlier session. She talked about this. Example in the US, CAFE standards, corporate average fuel efficiency standards. California led the way. Put a number, by 20x, you have to cars average must be 20 miles per gallon. That's it. You figure it out. Has to be realistic, but this is that has to be. You put a target. All the companies here can work together, cooperate to reach the target. If you have no target, it's like freestanding. I do whatever I like to do, get it done, and feel good about it. No, put a target.
Good. So it's clear. Last comment from your side, Tim, or yeah, please.
So I wholeheartedly agree with using targets, especially for technologists. I think data does dictate how we operate. We are, engineers at the end of the day, so we are very data driven. But those targets need to be supplemented by data, making that data really available, easy to consume by anyone that's doing technology, from a university student that is still starting out to the field to anyone that has been operating for decades. So I think making sure that we can get the data at a granular enough level that is usable and effective is important, and it has to be accurate and real and verified by the standards. I think that plays a big part in it, and making sure that we can embed that data into the decision-making models that are already operating in the environment today. So by that I mean setting those OKRs, setting those objectives and targets, but being able to give that at a granular level that I can then go to an accounting session or a budgeting session and say it's going to cost you X in dollars and carbon. So that way we're implementing it in the entire life cycle and ecosystem that we're doing, and being able to get it at the level of a board level or at anyone that's just writing a business case or coming up with an idea for software.
Thank you, Tim, very much. And any last words from Ihab or from Paolo? Maybe Ihab and then Paolo. Yeah.
Again, to my colleague's last point, but again, from a procurement perspective, I think, like we look at a total cost of ownership price-wise, we need simplified standards that could help us look at a total cost of ownership sustainability-wise too, over the life of an asset before we procure it. Now, total cost of ownership is from the point when you acquire an item up to the point where you dispose of it. But when it comes to sustainability, I'd like to call it the total cost of existence, because it's really from the stage where you start making a product and the raw materials, even extracting the raw materials to make that product, up to the point of getting rid of that product, of disposing of it. So it's very important to have simplified standards that we can use as criteria to evaluate. Thank you.
Yes, just to complement what he said, as I said before, we are trying to simplify our standard to create lighter version, or as you want, just to the scope, to have something very more simple to apply, because I think personally that we will have two types of standard in the future. One very rigorous, maybe to use for regulatory point of view, and some other little more simple for the poor people, for the poor designer that need to make an equipment, because he need to take a decision during the process or to make something. Regarding what he said from my friend from IEEE, I completely agree with you. We need the regulatory make the application of a standard. A standard organization for us is how to establish a value, a threshold, because it's continually changing, especially in ICT technology from year to year, and to have a value to respect is very, very complicated, I think. This is really the work for regulatory.
Thank you very much, Paolo. So I heard it clearly: cooperate, collaborate, open data, simplicity. All these kind of aspects need to be taken into consideration. So actually I have 1 minute to announce the outcome of the Green Digital Action Standards pillar that we have been working on last year. So maybe I'll announce it while we're all here, and then we close the session and the whole session together, so we don't have like an announcement session at the end. So basically there are two announcements. The first one is the call to action document has been done last week and is going to be launched today. It should be on the Green Digital Action website, ITU website. This call to action document has two sections. One is the standards that we all, as partners, and actually more partners were part of this collaboration, identified as very relevant standards for green and sustainability standards. And this call to action document has now more than 167 standards that has been identified. All were adopted and existing standards. Nothing is in the process. It's all existing already by the Standardization Organization that we think are the most relevant ones. So it gives us a map on what's out there in terms of green standards from all the organizations or from the most important international organizations. So this has been announced now, and it's on the Green Digital Action ITU website, so you can check it, download it, and everything. The second section in this call to action is some gaps that the group identified as important gaps. One of them is what Tim actually mentioned, which is the software efficiency kind of need to have to be standardized. And as Paulo was mentioning, I think there's some work actually happening in ITU right now on it. Nothing has been existing yet, but it's a kind of ongoing, which is a good thing that the gap is being addressed in a way. So these are the two sections you would find the call to action: the standards that are most relevant and the gaps. The second announcement is, because we don't want this to end here, and that was my last question to all of you, we're going to launch a peer learning working group. And this peer learning working group is expected to meet 2 or 3 times probably next year until COP29. And all the partners who've been in the Green Digital Action are automatically part of this peer learning group. You're going to get an emails for that and how to participate. But I know the session is being streamed, so anyone who would like, any organization, entity who would like to join this working group, they can just send the Green Digital Action email at the ITU Green Digital Action website, and just let us know that you want to be part of this group, and we're definitely going to be included. By that, I would end the session, and thank you very much for your participation and comments, and thanks for everyone, and thanks for ISO for hosting us, and thanks for ITU and all the partners for Green Digital Action Alliance. Thank you very much. Yes, I think it's picture time. Yeah. I can be in the back. I'm told. Okay, sure. Are we okay now? Or maybe I'll go for the other side so it's balanced. Come this way. Squeeze, baby, come closer. Yes.